Good afternoon. We are facing two big global changes at the same time, the corona pandemic and, of course, climate change. Getting out of them means making bold decisions now. It's clear that our economies not only need to recover, they need a green recovery. Minister Gewessler, what can governments do to enable strategies and technologies that help to build back better?
There would be a very short answer to this. Be clear and be decisive about where we need to go. But I'd still like to embed it a bit in the big picture that we see now. I think what the last year has taught all of us is what crisis feels like. And we've seen how crisis impacts our daily lives. And once the climate crisis is here, crisis would be the new normal. And nobody wants that. But we've also seen how crisis mobilizes resources, how we all have a longing for a better future, for a way forward, for solutions. We've developed vaccines in no time, in comparatively no time. So I think what we need to do now is to mobilize this longing, to mobilize the wish for solutions into not just a solution for the next year, but a solution for the next decades. And this is where climate action comes in, because we need to be sure that the way we build back now is the way we need to build back to solve the climate crisis, to solve the economic crisis at the same time. And this is exactly where climate action comes in, because it gives this triple benefit. So we need clarity, and I think we're rather good at that at the moment. At the EU level, the Green Deal is here to stay. That's our program out of the crisis. We're doing the same thing in Austria, so be clear that the way we invest now is the need to invest in climate action with a renovation wave, with building climate action into every single measure that we take now. For example, in the investment premium, where we double the premium for climate action, where we excluded investments in fossil fuel infrastructure. So you need to be clear and you need to be consequent in the way you design the solutions. And I think then we can in a way use this momentum in time, use this very specific point in time where we are now to go and move as societies in the right direction towards climate action.
We need to be clear, Sabine, Herlitschka, we also have to be radical. These are radical changes. Do you think that our societies are prepared for these changes?
Good afternoon, everyone. And congratulations to this kind of exchange, and in particular the topics you have chosen. I think radical change is always something tempting to discuss, but I want to stress that actually we have seen three developments for the last years. The first of all, of course, is sustainability in all dimensions. The second, digitalization, that has begun many years before. And the third one, I would also say, is a governance system fit to handle, to manage crisis situations. And above all, the corona crisis has demonstrated what's really important and what's urgent. And I think we will approach and discuss the other topics later on. But coming back to your question on society, I think mentioned transformation processes are the reason why I always underline education is key. We have to manage to take society with us. And the key for that is always education. If we see that, at least in Austria, we have a high share of people who finish school without the ability to read, to calculate, to write sufficiently. This is alarming. And now we talk about digitalization. We see that with the high degree of people who have significant and substantial doubts on basics of natural sciences, taken from the discussion on the vaccination. So above all, I think it's always education, reskilling, upskilling, qualification, but education is always key. And I think altogether we have to come up with a lot of measures to focus on that.
It's always helpful to look elsewhere, what you can learn from other countries. And Mette, Lykke, you are based in Denmark, and there the government seems to have a quite strategic approach. What can Austria learn from Denmark, Mette?
But it's not the most important one in the big picture. Building back better really is a key priority. I think in Denmark we have a strong history with excellent green solutions, the Vestas wind turbine technology being one of them. And we have, as a country, we've passed a law with, I think, the most ambitious target in the world, which is 70% carbon emission reduction by 2030. So I think that's a great start, but obviously it's not enough to just be ambitious with the targets. And I see that the clear risk right now is that we talk about the daily corona numbers all the time, and it is starting to take a lot of focus away from the green solutions. Last year I was chairing a climate panel to help offer the Danish government and parliament ideas for how we can boost green entrepreneurship. And the vision really is for Denmark to be the leader in green entrepreneurship worldwide. And I think out of that came some recommendations that some people might have expected around the capital and how we bridge between the universities and the business life. But I think maybe our main recommendation was actually to look at the way we've set up our tariff and tax system. So we are basically recommending a CO2 tariff. And it shouldn't be controversial to say that the polluters need to pay, but they really have to, and we have to make sure that the cost of CO2 is factoring in all the externalities it has on society. And I think now, during COVID, is the exact right time to talk about this, because all business owners are revising their strategies and they need a clear picture for what they can expect in 5 and 10 years. So saying that this is not the time, I think is misunderstood. This is the perfect time to talk about that.
This sounds like a very focused approach by Denmark. Andreas, you have a global perspective. Do you think that Austria and Europe are as focused as Denmark?
I think especially the Nordics, are famous for investing in digital and in green technologies. And when I look to the pandemic crisis, I'm pretty much sure that despite all the negative part out of it and that we have to overcome this crisis, the winner out of that is digital. Digital kept the societies, you can say, alive. And the second is, you can say, the green part. Remember about, for example, and this is why I'm not in favor, you can say, for CO2 taxes. We did so many stuff on that. In Austria, Ticketsteuer, so tax for flying. What did we see? The highest numbers of passengers ever in the years before. So there was no influence. But this pandemic has changed because now people were using video conferencing. The behavior was changing. So for me, I think if I look to the crisis, I think we have to see how can we incentivize rather the change of behavior and let the people learn that this behavior is better instead of, you can say, forcing like a teacher to squeeze out via taxes to the right-hand side. And to give you an example, I think this opportunity and somehow digital is marrying, you can say, sustainability. In corporate life, people will not come back to travel, you can say, on that demand like it was before, because video conferencing is there. And taking this into account, to invest, you can say, digital infrastructure, getting the people out of the big cities with that, because they can make home office, is going to revitalize the rural areas, which is also an important topic. Having the networks ready means with that automatically getting IoT stuff for measuring everything, which is good, like our minister has mentioned with housing, for example, intelligent houses, all these need networks. So for me, I think, and that is the clarity we have to come back is, what do we need? And maybe you think I'm talking in my own interest, but I'm super convinced we need the best digital infrastructure and combining it with the best, you can say, incentives in investing in green technology. And what is missing, especially I also would say out of this country, we are in competition with Denmark, for example. We should be better. Where is the lighthouse? Like, for example, the Baltic countries, they are best in digital governments. The CTOs are traveling around Europe and saying, why are the Baltics, what are we doing? Everybody wants to copy the Baltics. Where are the examples where we want to copy Austria in 5 to 10 years? And I think this is the opportunity we have. And money, to my end, doesn't play a role, because the crisis we are taking anyway, so much money in the hand, nobody knows in the end how much debt we are taking. So to invest $1 billion more in something which is accelerating the future is not able in normal times, but I would say in crisis times, it's possible. At least in my corporate life, I know the best situation to transform is always a crisis. That's the easiest time to do something. And I think now it's a perfect floor to set up a better and even a more powerful country, corporate entities for the next years than ever. So I see in the end, somehow it's a present. If you do not run airlines and hotels, I have to say.
And maybe the company that Mette Lykke runs in Denmark, because Mette, your company depends on restaurants, and suddenly these restaurants were all closed. How did you innovate in a time when you faced potential extinction for your company? How did that go?
Yeah, so Too Good To Go is a social impact company fighting food waste. So we connect the business owners who have food left by the end of the day with consumers who buy that food at a discount and thereby save the food from going to waste. And of course, when basically all restaurants in Europe shut down in the spring, we also saw our revenue going down very, very fast. But again, a crisis is also an opportunity. So we saw a lot of innovation inside the company, and the challenge actually was to figure out of all these great ideas, which ones are we going to focus on, so we don't try to do everything at once and it becomes chaos. But we did decide to make our platform available for takeaway, so for normal food, for those restaurants who were not yet digitalized and didn't have any alternative sales channels up and running yet. So we decided to do that and got it up and running in about a week's time in 10 countries. And that was quite amazing to see how fast we can actually innovate when we have to, and when you tell people this is your only priority now, just go do it, whatever it takes.
That's your experience with a startup. What about innovating in the global corporation with thousands of people who maybe fear for their jobs? Sabine, Herlitschka, how hard is innovating for you right now?
Yeah, exactly following the idea mentioned before, there is this famous quote of never waste a good crisis. This, despite the hardness, despite everything, but crises are always times when things can be done easier because everything basically is questioned. So for us, doing innovation is at the core of our activities as industry as such, and as well as Infineon. We are currently implementing the largest investment of our history, the largest investment in the sector of microelectronics, power microelectronics in Europe, 1.6 billion, to provide the technologies to enable the green revolution. Power electronics stands for energy efficiency and unlocking the potential of energy efficiency. And yes, things might be hard, but we go for it. And just by taking the example of our case of the implementation of this investment, despite the crisis, we are on track time-wise. We have even managed to start the new fab earlier because whatever it takes, we have done so in making it possible. And I think that's what it's all about. Having the right strategies based on the right vision is super, but in the end, it's all about implementation and getting it done, because we are effective if we get things done.
It seems like the leaders of the three companies on stage seem to do good with innovation, but there are other companies that are struggling in crisis to innovate. And Ministerin Gewessler, what do policymakers need to do right now to help these companies innovate?
I'd like to pick up two things that were mentioned earlier, one also by Mette. I'm in good exchange with my Danish colleague because I think we share many of the goals, but we also share the clarity that any goal is only as good as the implementation of the measures that follow. And I think this will be the proof of the pudding now in the next years to come at the EU level for the Green Deal, at the national level for the things we do. And if we want to make sure that our way out of the crisis, that we build back better, that we use this moment in time now to generate the innovations we need, the technological innovations, but also the societal innovations for solving the climate crisis, then I think we need to have a very holistic view of where we need to go. If I speak of technological innovations, we speak about green tech, we speak about, Sabine, Herlitschka and I exchange a lot about tech for green. How can we use existing technologies in a way that they help the climate crisis? For example, the potential of artificial intelligence. If I talk about societal innovations, then it's about how are we mobile, what are our consumption patterns, things like that. How do our traveling patterns change? So things that need to change also in our behavior. And I think for politicians, we need the full in German, I always say the suitcase of instruments. Yeah, I don't think it translates very well into English, but we need the legal framework that helps. We do need the tax framework that helps. I totally agree also with Mette on this point, because if we have these measures in place and combine them with the relevant funding and financial support systems, then we can make sure we steer and give good direction to the innovation that we need also in order to solve the climate crisis. Any green tech startup, any green technology will, in a business calculation, work much better if the tax system is right. Yeah, if the tax system is built in a way that the green tech has the advantage and not the fossil fuel infrastructure or the fossil fuel technology. So we need to really have this holistic view in policy making, from the legal framework to the tax system to the necessary financial support. And in Austria, we try, especially in my ministry now, with an extra budget in innovation, with steering this budget towards climate action, steering this budget also especially in a direction also of startups and industry transformation as the two big pillars, then I think we can really make something very productive out of this moment in time.
You mentioned taxes and subsidies. Andreas Bierwirth, you have a global view on Europe and other regions of the world. How do governments support industries with these measures? Is it going well in Europe compared to other places?
I think, and that's an overall European, you can say, issue, that the so-called master plans regarding particular industries are more, you can say, focused in, you can say, other continents. The Chinese are having like 10, 20 years business plan, and they say, I want to own that kind of business segment. Just remember the Huawei discussion we have on the public, on the digital infrastructure part, for example. Let's take another example, the US economy in these moments of time. They are giving a lot of grants. So they're just, you can say, giving money as a present in this crisis. You do not have to pay back. While on the European part, overcoming the crisis means getting to money. But most of the money is debt for companies, loans, which you have to pay back later. So it's good to survive. But nevertheless, it's, you can say, an additional burden when you have to overcome the future. And I think this clarity, we are a little bit in the middle. And we have to overcome that system. Where do we want to be? And how can we act? So I would not say that this clarity, like we have it in other continents, is with us. I see the willingness and the understanding, but we are somehow prisoner in our own complex system. So it feels for me, and God not getting it through. And also for me, if it comes to fundings or taxes, whatever, I might not be against CO2 tax. I translate CO2 tax as, again, an additional negative impact on the result of my company, whatever company I have. If it is neutral and I have to pay less taxes somewhere else, if you have a steering effect in, it is very sensible. And if, for example, I like the comment of holistic view, if I take just the airline segment, which I know from the past, the US is giving grants to all major US airlines. In Europe, only loans and the governments are entering in. So the whole system, like IAG or Lufthansa, they are suffering like hell. The business is away anyway, and now another tax is coming it on. So then it comes to a decision, do we want to own the segment? If not, do we want to keep Airbus on the continent, which is one of the key drivers in Europe, like Huawei, for example. And this holistic view on what business do we own, how do we want to steer, let them survive, that was one example. We see in a lot of industries where I say funding and clarity and master plan where we want to go is not clear. And I think the green part is our super chance.
And this is a global race between Europe and other parts of the world right now. And I mean, you heard there more clarity is needed. How can you provide it?
I think the Green Deal at the European level has really a potential to be a game changer if we use it wisely and if we are consequent in the implementation. But it's a game changer in a way that it's in a way that climate action is discussed at equal level, it's on an equal footing with the economic question, and that it was always meant as an economic program as well. So it's really it's good, and I really appreciate that the Commission, that the Council, that we are clear on this and stay on track in the Green Deal. And I think what this crisis probably also has shown us is the vulnerabilities we have in our global exchange and in the global field. We've seen it, of course, very directly with in the health system. Yeah, how do we get masks? Where are they produced, and why do certain things not work anymore in the crisis? And I think it's very important that we think about also the technologies and the supply chains that we need in strategic areas that we need in Europe for the implementation of the Green Deal in a different way. And one example that, different example than airline industry, but also is the photovoltaics industry, out of many others. We were leader in innovation, in knowledge and intelligence in the 70s and 80s, and then everything moved to Asia. Yep. And so the question is, what do we do with this situation now? And I think we see that we need to think differently about what kind of strategic industry sectors we really need and want back in Europe in a way, and what's the policy framework we need to enable that. And that's why I also, for example, with many colleagues from other countries, supported a initiative to look specifically at the photovoltaics industry, because that's an industry we need. There will be thousands of jobs, there will be value created, and so let's make sure we do this in Europe.
And technology is a great example, because we can see that when China gets stronger right now in the recovery phase, Sabine, Herlitschka, technology also reflects values of these companies. Are you concerned about that?
Yeah, technology is not neutral. As much as global trade has been and global exchange has been beneficial, and the major global challenges require global answers. But at the same time, I think we find ourselves in a global competition in terms of economics, in terms of culture, and in terms of political systems. And the answer to that, the instrument nowadays, is technology, because nowadays technology represents also values. We in Europe have different values linked to how we use technology as compared to other regions. Think of the China social credit system, for instance. And therefore, for good reason, we talk about technological sovereignty. And in essence, we need to have the core technological competences, the system-relevant technological competences at our hand. And this is very much linked to data and everything around that.
Having discussed about all of this, Andreas Bierwirth, are you optimistic about Austria Europe in this race?
Let's say optimistic. I'm partially optimistic, because what I see is that the understanding even of the game, what is happening right now, I think is not yet understood to everybody, or it is very difficult to transport it also to the public. and you can say support from the public what you are doing. What I'm saying is the US is too big to fail. They have a clear governance and they are very speedy. China is like a startup. They have no legacy. They just have a master plan. They can go like hell. And we are a little bit like the companies who are there for 30, 40 years successful. We have our processes and systems built up over the years. And as you sometimes have problems to compete with startups, we have problems as a company in changing our legacy systems to compete with startups. So are we in Europe to compete with China. And I think we have to overcome this. And therefore, I'm optimistic because the crisis is a present. But I think that I'm pessimistic. Are we taking this present and now going to transform on big scale and really taking the opportunity to cut down walls and do it in another way? And this is where I say it's a super outstanding chance, but we have to take it.
You are partially optimistic, as I understand. Mette, Lykke, what about you? You are hoping to change behaviors. Is that possible in a crisis like this?
Yeah, I think COVID really showed us that we are able to change behavior collectively if we decide that it's important enough. So I hope we can decide that the climate crisis is important enough and then stand behind a similar mobilization there. I'm a born optimist. I do have a concern, though, that when it comes to the EU, that the governance we have and the sometimes lack of alignment among all these countries means that we lose the speed and we lose the ability to take the bold decisions that are needed here. So I don't know how we're going to solve that. I hope some countries will kind of split out and be ambitious and bold, but it is a pretty big issue.
Minister.
Just one sentence in this. If we look back 1 year, we've had a climate goal, a CO2 emissions reduction goal of minus 40% in Europe. When the crisis started, the COVID crisis started, I had many colleagues around the continent who said, now it's not the time for climate action. And 1 year later, in December 2020, we decided in the Council an emissions reduction of at least minus 55% until 2030. Nobody would have thought this possible a year ago. And even though we're in the middle of a pandemic, we did it. And there are governments pushing for it. Austria is pushing for it. Denmark is pushing for it. There is an alliance of countries that say, no, we need to be ambitious. Let's not lose our goals out of sight, and let's build this alliance and make it even bigger. Yes, it's convincing, it's arguing, it's fighting every day for it to be a reality, but it pays off. And I think the climate law and the way we managed to be more ambitious at this special point in time, I think is for me one of the key signals why I'm optimistic and why I'm in this position to continue work for this.
So we came to an optimistic note. Thank you very much to this panel for this optimistic discussion, and back to you, Katrin.